Heavenly Father and Divine Mother. Here at Ananda, we start every prayer with those two phrases. We invoke the presence of the Divine Mother and of the Heavenly Father. Why do we do that? Why does God need to be a father or a mother? Yogananda actually said, if you look at the lives of many of the Western saints, especially in the Christian tradition, you find a lot of references to God the Father. And in that yuga, which is Kali Yuga, which I won't go into a full thing, but everyone here is familiar with the yugas on some level. Kali Yuga is an age of discipline, of material, of you learn the hard way. If you want to be spiritual, you go into a cave. You cover yourself in ash. You have to basically reject everything in the world in order to find some kind of truth inside. And the father comes as the image of the disciplinarian, right? We all see the father's job is usually the one to dole out the Divine Mother gets the rewards, the father gets left with the rest. This is the curse of being a father sometimes. But the reason, and Yogananda actually said that now that we're entering this age of Dwapara Yuga, this age of energy, that a more appropriate way of relating to God for us is the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother is compassionate and sweet and nurturing. But in fact, it's only in addition to the Father. So we're not rejecting the Father. We're now having both of these as the core elements of our spirituality, of our worship. Relating to God in this way is also important because for the same reason that we have gods and goddesses, Swamiji would often talk about how the gods and goddesses of Hinduism are actually, they're not idol worship, they're ideal worship. We're worshiping prosperity, we're worshiping kindness, we're worshiping inner strength. These are the ideals that we're worshiping. So when we bring in the Father and the Mother, what are they as ideals? The Father may represent strength, courage, dignity. The Mother, kindness, warmth, compassion. And it's not to say that the Father is the masculine, or the man, and the Mother is the woman. These are divine masculine and divine feminine qualities. We all have a Heavenly Father within us. We all have a Divine Mother within us. It's just ways of seeing. Humans are designed, for whatever reason, to see things in terms of archetypes. We relate to things that can compare to the experiences we've already had. And so these can be very, very helpful things in terms of looking at our own children, the children that we've been given to raise, right? Because in a sense, in a very real sense, we have incarnated in order to exemplify divine qualities. I mean, in truth, if you get to the core of it, we are here to become one with the divine, yeah? The process of doing that involves us attuning more and more to those qualities. So when we are saying, how can I be a better father? We should think about, what is our Heavenly Father? As we want to become a better mother, we should think, what is our Divine Mother? The way I like to think of it, and this is actually a real challenge for me when I started in education, was in the Gurukul system. So our school in Ananda village where I taught was based on the Gurukul system. Basically the idea that at some point, at a certain age, you give your child over to a teacher, a spiritual teacher, and they take ownership of their lives from that point. And so they teach them all of the skills they need to know, but they also teach them spirituality, they teach them about God, whatever it is that teacher feels in tune with. That brings us to the idea that if we have been given this child, if this child chooses to incarnate in our family, there must be some reason. If the child is here to learn specific lessons, as we all are, we all come here to learn specific lessons, then the role of the parents becomes not, I have to make sure that you get a specific job, or I have to make sure that you get whatever material things, that you have enough shelter, enough food. These things definitely you need, but the higher version of that, that's just the Father and Mother. But if we want to be the Heavenly Father, the Divine Mother, we have to try to figure out, try to intuit where that child's next steps are, what that child needs spiritually. Because that child is an Atman, right? It's a soul. It's just like us. It looks like this little bumbling little thing. It's 2 and it can barely crawl, or it's 3 and it starts to walk and it falls over. But inside is the soul. Inside is this infinite spark of divine, and it has things that it needs to learn in order to progress to where it's going. Because we're all on this journey, right? We start from wherever we are, and through our life experiences, we are born, we live, we get married, we have a job, and eventually we leave this world. All of these things in this story arc of our lives are the things that make us who we are. Now, most people, just by virtue of karma or their own energy and interest, go through this process automatically, right? Things happen to them, they respond. It's this constant cycle of energy coming in, energy going out. But if we can bring consciousness to it, we may go this far on accident, but we may be able to go to be continued on the next board if we are given the tools and also have someone around us with the wisdom to be able to guide us. So when we talk about conscious parenting, truly, I think we're talking about the guru-disciple relationship. Because we can let our child go automatically, but we are fulfilling the dharma of being parents, of being guides for these children much more if we are consciously trying to tune in. What does my child need in order to be a better person? What does my child need to grow into their next step? And that can be a hard thing. You look at a 1-year-old and you're just like, they're so sweet and adorable and drooling and there's stuff everywhere. But you love them so much, you want to give them what they need, but it's hard to tell what a 1-year-old needs. They need food. They need to be safe. There's not a lot of, let's say, spiritual guidance that you can give a 1-year-old, yeah? You could tell them, all is Brahma, and they'll be like, go, go, go. So, it's a lot of it is about timing, and we're going to go into different stages that Swamiji identified that can help you tune in to what to give your child when in their lives. Did I already ask how many people have children? Can I see a show of hands? Wonderful. So yeah, is there an eraser for this so I can, as I go? For sure. On the right side. Thank you. I'm just going to pull this back towards me also. So, if our job is to help, I'm going to erase these two. If our job is to help them grow, we have to identify what things they need. So I'm going to go into something that Swami Kriyananda identified certain stages in development of children. I talked a little bit about this last class. Basically, we, as people, for those of you who are familiar with astrology, go through cycles. Planets start where we're born and they go in through a cycle and they return to where they are. So we have the Saturn return, Jupiter return. That's the sign that it's come back to where it is when we were born. I may be preaching to the choir. That was very revolutionary to me when I first heard it, but this may be like second nature for you all. So Jupiter does these turns, and also in astrology, you probably know, Jupiter is the guru. It's the role of the guru, the divine pole star of your life, and it can give you indications about where you're going. In fact, astrology may be a good place to pick up if it's something that you're already in tune with, because when you read your child's chart, you may get hints about what kinds of things to look out for, what kinds of their natural tendencies may be. But I prefer to do it the personal way, or the hard way, as it were. So these are the tools of maturity. So these are the 4 tools that basically we are all a combination of all of the skills that we know, of all the things that we understand. And those manifest in many different ways, which I'll go into now. The first stage is the body. Now, as Jupiter, when you're born, Jupiter goes out on this journey, and it's a 12-year cycle. 6 years going outward, 6 years coming back inward. The first stage of that is the outward stage of the body. And I like to think of it that way also. As Jupiter goes outward, these stages have kind of a rhythm to them. They go outward and they go inward. There's kind of a flow. There's the waves go out and then they come back in. The body one, for anyone who's had young children, is sort of obvious, right? They're figuring out all of their physical needs. At first you have to provide everything for them. And as they get older, they start to figure stuff out. Also, if you had children, you notice they're always grabbing everything and putting everything into their mouths. That is the way that they sort of try to figure out what is going on in this new material plane that I'm expected to function in. I remember one story my dad told me when I was very, very young. I mean, it's not even really a story, just so much as a moment that many of the parents have probably experienced. But my dad said he didn't think he was ready to be a father. And this may be something that you can relate to. I know that if I did, I would have moments of, I don't think I can actually shepherd a child all the way through this whole thing that I just went through. And so he was really nervous. And then I was born, and there was a baby. And he still didn't think that maybe he had the right thing. And he said, soon thereafter, I can't remember, but I was very, very, very young. And he was kind of leaning over me, and I reached up and I grabbed his finger, with my little hand. And it was in that moment that he knew that he could do it and he had to do it. But also that it was a commission from God. Swami Kriyananda, this is sort of a side note, but Swami Kriyananda's mother, when she had Swamiji, back then he was Donald, or James, I guess, she said, "This first child I give to you, God. This child is for you." And actually, that is a practice that we should try to do every day. Every time I walked into a classroom, that I would try to consciously think, I'm not here to teach them history. I'm not here to teach them math. I'm here to help them come closer to you. That was my process, and it may work for you as well. But my father also did that with me. I only found out years later when I came onto the path, which happens to be his path. My parents are also in Ananda in California, and he told me only after I met Swamiji and was on this path that he said, "Oh yeah, I remember when you were born, I actually offered you to God," and so it worked. So the body years are years of discovering the different ways of learning in that. Hold on, I want to put, there's these, maybe 4 to 6 is more appropriate. There's also these subsections, right? So 0 to 3 is a little bit automatic, but 4 to 6, they start walking, they start moving, they start reaching out and grabbing things. And it's a time, because really when we talk about helping them to achieve the success that we want them to, that comes, if you're in this room, you have some sense that comes from higher principles. Things like the nobility, kindness, all of the things that I've been talking about. And so this is when you can start to introduce those things. But what happens when you tell a 4-year-old about nobility and compassion? They're already on to the next thing, right? Because when you're in your body, the energy is just going out, They're also just chaotic. They're running and falling and bumping into things. They don't know what's going on, but they have a lot of energy and they need a way to channel it. So much of education for life is about taking energy that is already there and channeling it into a better direction. So Swamiji talks a lot in the body years about using things like dance, music, anything that you can feel with the body. Art, kids love to make pictures and finger paint. One example he gives about ways to turn those things into more positive directions is with dance or body movement. So there's, he talks about, a lot of modern dancing happens in the legs, right? People are bouncing around like this. They're like, "Hey, how's it going?" And you're just kind of dancing. But the upper body isn't even really moving. It's all the lower body. For those of us who know about the chakras, what is in the lower body? It's our root. They're not bad, but there are lowest tendencies. There are tendencies that make sure that we have, enough food, enough water, shelter, all of the base material things, the root chakra. And so these things, when you're only moving your legs, can be a little ego-affirming. They affirm the idea that you are your body, you are all of these things. And so much about raising children in a conscious way and getting them to expand their awareness, to understand that they're not just this body, that they actually are this much larger thing, and that they can experience that directly. So Swamiji talks a lot about using arms and the upper body. I'm not a dancer. You did just see an example of that. But you can sort of, because kids don't yet know that they should be embarrassed by stuff, Like there's this idea that we slowly over time become conditioned to the idea that you're supposed to act a certain way and everyone else is doing this, so I have to do it, and so I can't do this because then people will think I'm weird. But in these years, there's not much of that, right? They're doing what they do. They're actually, in a lot of ways, this is one of our best periods. And if we can keep the spirit that we have in these years, we'll be extremely successful in life. Because so many of the things that we talk about in the later stages are unlearning the things that we made a mistake about in the early years. Thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be like everybody else. Oh, these things that I feel are bad and I should not express them because that one time something bad happened when I did. So in the body years, Swamiji talks about using themes. So you can say oh, we're going to do a dance, but you don't necessarily tell them. Education for Life teaches that you should lead the energy, but never just instruct. Say, okay, you should be happy. You should live with more consciousness. You should be a more compassionate person. You get them to experience it for themselves. So in this case, you could say something like, Swamiji gives the example, spreading flowers. So spreading flowers, you're not going to do with your feet. You automatically are going to do it with your hands, right? It's this automatic thing. There's only one real way to do that. Or say hello to the sun. Hello to the sun. Because all of these things in the body, we learn this in Hatha Yoga, right? When we move our body in certain ways, it activates energy in a certain direction. And so when you're doing these things, all of a sudden energy is rising up the spine, right? You're doing something that helps you to look up, to raise your energy up. Because the whole of education and the whole of the spiritual path is getting people to raise their energy upwards, right? When we have low energy, nobody wants to be around someone who has low energy. No one wants to be around a child who has low energy. So in the body years, we're getting children who already have some energy to move it in a constructive direction. There are a few games that can work. And I'm going to just give you some games and tips that we use in Education for Life because they're fun, but also because they have higher purposes, and you can sort of start to see how you might use these games or anything else that you already do in a conscious way. None of these things are invented. We're always just channeling what's already there. So here is the question. Can I have a volunteer? Yes, and yes. I need two actually, so you come too. So Education for Life is at its core experiential. So this gets to be part of the experience. So for this first one, you're going to face each other. So and if you can stand here, and you can stand a little bit closer. A little bit closer. Sorry, yeah, we're just there. So yeah, don't get too close. So a little bit apart. I'm sorry, I did say I wouldn't go over there, so I will honor that. So this is a game where you try to knock the other person off their balance. I'm going to just move this back to save my water, because in the inevitable collapse, he may break some things. So what you do is you put your hands up like this, palms outward, and the goal of the game is just to knock the other person off their balance. All you can do, and be gentle, all you can do is hit the palms of the other person. That's all you're allowed to do. You can't touch their shoulder or their face or anything else.
And you have to get them off.
And you have to get them off balance. And actually, before you start, put your feet right together. That makes it a little more fun. You can raise. If you're dealing with younger children, you may want to augment it to have the feet more separate. But since they are older, you already feel a little off balance, right? It's also nice to escalate. So if they start like this and they get the hang of it and it's really easy, then you're like, okay, now you can bring your feet close together because it raises the challenge, it raises the stakes. So if you would, see if you can, with your palms, just hitting each other's palms, different, oh, you gotta mean it. No. This is not a cooperative sport. So we stopped. First of all, very well done. That was perfect. We got to see the escalation from kindness to wait a second. I can win this. This is a competition. But in fact, what did we see work? So he pushed and pushed, and eventually, like, there was some resistance, right? So if you push to me right now, and I just do this, there's nowhere for that energy to go. And in fact, oftentimes you guys can sit down, actually. Thank you so much. That was great. There are, so there's a few different lessons there. So one of them is that as the students go along and start practicing it themselves, they'll notice sometimes it's good to push, but other times it's good to like completely absorb, to basically flow with their movement. It's the whole principle actually behind the martial art Aikido. You use the force of your attacker or opponent against them. So they come in with a punch, you throw them down, they basically threw themselves down. You basically are just guiding them. So with this, we're seeing that in order to succeed in life, you don't always have to impose your will. You can also let things pass right through you. And so in a very simple game, you're already getting to show and they're getting to experience that they don't always have to push. Sometimes they can give, or sometimes they can just pat a little bit or be in stasis. I will say also it's very good that you were so kind to each other and so accommodating. That is a good sign. There's another game that I like. This sometimes you use with older kids. It all depends on your own intuition, because these ages are guidelines. They are based on larger movements in life, but you're never too old to do something for your body. You're never too old to address the other areas, and vice versa. It's not like the next stage is feeling. It's not like when you're 0 to 6 you don't have feelings, right? You have lots of feelings. In some ways, all you are is feelings. You're really, really, really happy. Then you're really, really, really sad. Then you're like really, really, really hungry. You do everything really. So there's another game that is fun in terms of, well, I'll tell you what it's for afterwards. So first, we can all do this together just where we're sitting. We're going to hold our breath for 5 seconds. Okay. Get yourself all set. Get yourself prepared. Eye of the tiger. Okay. And begin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you can release. How was that? Was it hard? No. No? Really? So you think you could just do that? Like, maybe we should just raise the stakes a little bit. Okay, let's all hold our breath for 90 seconds. Okay, and go. I'm not actually going to make us do 90 seconds. The point is, it's a game where you can sort of see, well, actually, what is the point? Let me ask first if anyone can spot what lesson you could teach from a game like that. Maybe a little hidden. Willpower is definitely in there, finding ways to do it. But what did I do when I went from 5 to 90? Was that? I raised the stakes. Did I do it realistically? No. So when we're setting goals for ourselves and challenging ourselves, we have to find 5 way too easy, right? On 5, you could probably, like yesterday I went to get a haircut, and for those of us who are traveling from abroad, we're told over and over again, avoid, letting the water from the shower go in your mouth. You have to be very careful because the bacteria are different, and so you can get sick. It's a whole thing. But it's in my head, and it's been in my head for years. I've been traveling to India now for 10 years. And so I was sort of not paying attention. I had my eyes closed. The haircutting stopped, and all of a sudden, there was water being sprayed in my face. And I had no warning and no context. And in fact, it felt very nice, and it was meant to relax, and in fact it did, but I had to just close my mouth immediately and hold my breath. And he was going for a while, but it was 10, really spraying the thing. I mean, it seemed like it would have been more efficient to just pour the bottle on my head. but I'm not a hairstylist. But what I did notice was that in that moment, my breath was already out, and I just closed my mouth and held my breath, and I was able to do it for like 15, 20 seconds. So 5 seconds is a way too easy goal for most people, but 90 is way too hard for most people. And so finding a goal and training children also to find goals that are appropriate, challenging, but attainable. Because when we are achieving goals, especially when we're young, the feeling of attaining goals is something that you want to really inculcate early on, because that's the driving force. When they know that they can set a goal that they're not able to do right now. So if, let's say, they hold their breath, it just says hold your breath as long as you can, and they're able to do 20 seconds. Well, then the next time we'll try for 25 or 30, but we don't try for 90. It's all about setting things appropriate goals. The entirety of the spiritual path can be summed up in the word appropriate. You have to do what's appropriate for you, and in the case of your children, you do what's appropriate for them. So you can't just give rules, say, oh yeah, everyone should do 30 seconds, because for some people that'll be a cakewalk, and for some people that'll be impossible. I once saw a guy in a pool. When I was a kid, I grew up in an Ananda community, and so there was a guy there, and we were all swimming, and he was like, do you want to see me hold my breath? And we were like, yeah, that sounds cool. So he goes into the pool underwater where he can't cheat, and he starts meditating. And we were watching the clock. He almost hit 10 minutes. Wow. It was incredible. I mean, and, he was a guy that I would see around. He was, a part of Ananda. I would see him. I never thought, I had no idea what was going on inside, but he had unlocked something, because eventually if you raise and raise and raise the goals and raise your energy, you're going to be able to do amazing things. And the feeling of your child when they're able to do 30 seconds, when they were only able to do 20 seconds before, is an amazing feeling. That's energy going up the spine. They're experiencing a taste of divine, actually. And when they get that, then they realize they can do anything. When I came to India, the same thing happened to me. I ended up going on a motorcycle trip. I got this idea. I really wanted to ride a motorcycle around India. And I rode from Pune to Delhi, which is about 1,600 kilometers. And I had never ridden a motorcycle before. Yeah, questionable. So, but I got this idea, and because I think in part of the training I'd received in Education for Life, I realized this is a goal that I can achieve. I'm going to have to put out a lot of energy, but this is something I can do. This is attainable. And in fact, Shurjo and I, went on this trip, and we're both still here. So it must have worked. I'll just give one more example for body before we move on. And this actually is this is harder to do with younger children. It is a body exercise, but sometimes, and it also touches into other things, but it's something called a trust circle. Now, I'm not going to do it with us now. I'm not going to ask for volunteers because it's a little bit big. But basically what you do is you get in a circle. You get everyone in a circle. It has to be a tight circle, so you're limited by the number of people. So if you have a class, that's one thing. If you just have one child at home, this may not be accessible. But basically, they stand in the middle with their feet together, and then with the circle around, they have to throw themselves. I mean, this is a popular team building exercise. And what it does is it teaches trust in your friends, in your family, whoever it is. But it also is something about you have to keep your body completely tense, actually. You have to keep it rigid because it won't work. If you go like this and you fall into somebody, you're all on the ground. So showing and through experience that if they have control over their body, they're able to do things that they aren't able to do when they don't have control. So a lot of it comes back to finding ways. Sports can be a really good thing to start right at the end of this. 5 and 6 year olds can start to be coordinated enough to play some simple sports, soccer or football. I'm not sure how it's called here. I'm always confused in America. Those sorts of things. But anything that involves the body, when you're trying to teach them the alphabet, instead of writing A, B, C, or whatever it is, ask them to make this shape they see with their bodies. Have them trace the thing with their finger on the paper. Swami talked about how in his school they actually use sandpaper to give texture so that they can actually feel the tactile sensation. So everything has to do with what we're experiencing through touch, taste, sight, smell, all of the senses, getting them all involved, smelling pleasant smells, getting them into nature, getting them to smell flowers, things that automatically trigger these positive experiences that we've had. A lot of what raising children is sharing the positive experiences that we've had with them and getting them to experience it too. So that brings us to the next stage, feeling. So this is from, say, 7 to 12. Does anyone have a 7 to 12-year-old or someone who's gone through this range? Did you notice at a certain point when they were growing that they were able to perceive things that they hadn't been before, that their awareness had expanded to include maybe others? Feeling years, sometimes maybe like they understand how friends feel. In the body years, a lot of times they have friends, but they may not be able to understand what the friend's going through. They haven't expanded their awareness to the point where they can say, oh, my friend is sad because of this. In the feeling years, we get to see that. We get to, it's the inward pulling of Jupiter, so it's a more inside kind of experience where the heart opens up and you're able to experience things more directly. Now the problem with that, or the challenge around that, is that it can be an overwhelming experience. When you first feel overwhelmed by a friend's pain or your own pain, it's all encompassing, right? When you're in this age and you feel sadness, you don't just feel sad, you are sad. Like your entire being is sad, right? This is actually a continuation of the body where the extremes of emotion kind of come into play. And you can see, I always give the example of like people who are sort of puddles. You kind of melt like in The Wizard of Oz, and you're just like there on the floor, like experiencing all of these emotions and sadness. That's not to say that you don't experience those as adults, right? Because we still, we still cry. We still have like emotional moments. But the whole purpose of the feeling years and what to do with them is to take emotion and turn it into action. So when I have someone who's having an emotional experience or really upset or sad, the idea is to take that feeling and find out where you can bring it to its next place. Because we all know we're going to be happy again. Like even when you're sad, you can sort of have a sense like maybe someday I'll be happy. When they're feeling sad, sit with them, talk to them. Acknowledge their feelings, but don't get stuck in the feelings, because this is the time when they can start taking that feeling and turning it into something. Sadness is a powerful feeling. There's a lot of energy in it. The only problem is that it's pulling you down. But if you can turn that same energy and pull it up, then you actually have in some way more energy. I sometimes think of it as like gravitational pull, like of a planet. We use the gravitational pull of Earth in order to slingshot rockets to the moon, to Mars. Excuse me. Would it be possible to refill my bottle? I'm a little dry. Thank you. So in the same way, we can actually use negative feelings as a slingshot. We use the gravitational pull of that feeling that we're having to send us actually even farther up. So, a practical example, if someone is feeling sad because their friend was mean to them, one way to get them, they're right here. They're experiencing all the sadness and stuff and everything's bad. The first step is to get them to feel right here. Okay, what do you think they're feeling? Thank you. What is the other person feeling? Maybe they're not ready to think about how they're feeling. So Even like what am I feeling? What I'm seeing you feeling sad, and it makes me sad to see that you're sad. And then maybe they're ready to talk about the other person or the pain that they're feeling. Oh, you're feeling painful. That must be hard. What are you feeling? You can get them to sort of say some of the things that they're experiencing. Oh, Bobby hit me. It's probably not Bobby here. He hit me, and now I'm sad. Okay. Why are you sad? Because I hurt. Well, maybe. I mean, yes, that's true. You should always validate their feelings. But are you also sad because Bobby hurt you? But that Bobby was willing to actually do that to you? Yes, you're helping them see the end result of their experience. And then say, well, why did Bobby do that? Well, he wanted the thing I was playing with. So, is there a solution here? So you're bringing the thing, and you may not use the same language, but you're bringing this hard event into something like, what can we do to make it better? What can we fix it? And it's a very important distinction to make, that you're not just trying to paste over it. You're not just saying, oh, what do you want to do? You want to have some candy or ice cream? Now we'll feel better. You're looking for a solution that will actually solve the thing that happened in the first place. So maybe, do you think that you could share with the person? That's sort of at the beginning of these, 7 to 9 or 10. Do you think that you could do something nice for them? That's a big ask for someone who's young. But if you can get them to try it, they will immediately get the feedback loop, the experience of Bobby is feeling happy again, Bobby is kind again. We're both able to actually progress in our friendship. I mean, this is the way we think of it, not for them. At this time, creating an environment for them is really important. So Swamiji talks a lot about how important music is at this age, for the same reasons as dance in the body years. We're trying to bring energy upwards, expand awareness. So what kind of music are you listening to when you drive to school with them? What kind of music do they just listen to in general? Are they ready to start making music? Helping them pick up an instrument might be helpful, because they're now at this point starting to get natural creativity. They're able to sort of start channeling this natural desire to make things, and they're ready for a channel for that. So finding an instrument for them to play, a medium for them to make art, to create things, to express the things that they're feeling inside, but in an outward way. You don't say, here's some paint, now tell me what you're feeling with the paint, because they'll do it automatically. Kids are hardwired to do this. This is their natural inclinations. All we're here to do is shepherd those inclinations forward as parents and as educators. Another important thing to do when they're in, excuse me, in the heart of an experience, of a negative experience, is perspective. I gave this example last class. It's been really helpful for me. It may not apply to everyone, but these are the kinds of things that you can think of. I sometimes like to picture, I have a really bad problem, I'm really upset about it, nervous, anxious, sad, whatever it is. I zoom out on my life. So I give the example of the Google Maps zoom out. You start at the closest level, and then you zoom out and out and out. And you go, you can see the whole city, you can see the whole state, country, planet. And on Google Earth, you can actually zoom out and see the other planets, but you don't have to go that far. But basically, a lot of what gets children stuck in emotion is the lack of perspective. They haven't lived enough to know that problems go away reliably and that you can solve them. So a lot of times when they're here, addressing the problem that they're in will only lead them more into the problem. So you're still talking about Bobby, but they're just getting more and more upset about, oh, he hit me and this is bad and everything is terrible. So look at the bigger picture. Are you going to be angry tomorrow? Are you looking forward to something else in your life? Are you always going to feel this way? And eventually they start to see, no, actually, I'm going to be able to move past this eventually. I'm going to be able to expand, basically. They're not going to say it that way, beyond it. Another key thing here is waiting until whatever it is subsides a little bit before you try to redirect it fully. So if they're fully in like the heart of it and they're blinded, giving time to relax, to cool down. It doesn't have to be punishment to sort of have your child like cool off in the room while they just sort of like regain control and perspective. If you can get them to sit up straight, that's always a good thing to do. It can be a big ask to ask a child who's really in the thick of it to sit up straight, but these sorts of things, when you introduce them in small ways, they may not catch right away. It's the practice. Just like for us in meditation, the first meditation may not be good. We may be restless. We may not want to sit. But the more we practice, the better we get. The same with children. The more you practice giving perspective, channeling things into positive ways. Excuse me. Waiting for the anger to subside and sitting up and opening the chest. Those sorts of things will start to become second nature, and they'll be able to do them automatically. I'm going to now go onward. So after the feeling years, when they've sort of had these more internal experiences, they're dealing with interpersonal things, but as it relates to them, we get into the will years. Who has a kid in the will years? Teenagers. Yes, excellent. What is the stereotype about teenagers? Rebellious is one. Anything else? Are they confused? Could be one, certainly.
Angsty?
Angsty? Yes, definitely angsty. So what Education for Life trains us to do as parents, as educators, is to look at the why of things. Why are these things happening? So they're rebellious, they're angsty, they're having a lot of like emotions. They're maybe, I don't want to assume, but like in a lot of situations they reject the parents. If the parent says that the sky is blue, they'll be like, no, it's green. And they'll be like, well, I'm looking at it. It's clearly blue. No, it's a shade of green. I can tell. They know things. The reason that this happens is because in this age, even though it seems like they get really like nihilistic and they don't care about anything, what's actually happening is they have a deep desire they're deeply idyllic. They are actually really idealistic. They have this desire to see their highest ideals manifest. The problem is what's happening around them is often not that. So we see a world where the things that they think should be different are falling apart. In Europe right now and some in the United States, there's actually students right now are protesting climate change, global warming, by basically leaving school on prescribed Fridays that they agree on. So they're walking out of class as a protest for what is happening on the planet right now, because they're concerned that they are not going to have a planet to live on in the near future. Now, wherever you stand on that is a positive expression of willpower, because in this age, they're going to see problems, they're going to see things, but they're now old enough that they can do something about it. And the best way to channel will during these years is to give them outlets to do it. So a lot of that will be helping them to find what it is they're idealistic about, because especially if they're going to a regular school and their friends are fine, but maybe not the highest idyllic forms, you have to help them find out what it is they care about, helping them find their passions. So a lot of that can come from the feeling years. You're watching them as they grow up, you're noticing, oh, you used to really like art, or you really used to like music. Have you ever thought about joining a band? Or buy them like a guitar for their birthday, or whatever it is. Don't just buy them a guitar if they've never seen a guitar. That could be a waste of guitar money. but finding the things that they're already interested and getting them to do it. It's also a year, this is right around the age when students would be given to the Gurukul system, right? And so it's an age where they're looking for more of a framework to ground themselves in outside of the home. And it doesn't have to be a rejection of the home. As long as we give them the people, the opportunities, the things to do that will allow them to challenge themselves, to learn who it is they are and what they have to give. This is the year I have the most, or the stage I have the most experience with. I taught in high school at Ananda Village for 4 years, and we used to go to extremes with this sometimes. I remember one time, as a way of testing the will, we had, do you all know about the ice bucket challenge? Yes. So that was going around at the time, and we just had this idea, why don't we see even more, what would be the escalation of just pouring a bucket of ice over your head in order to it was, at that point, it was to raise money and awareness for a noble cause. But what about, how is that testing your own will? How can we use that to test the will? So we actually had a bucket of ice and we dunked our heads in it and then we kept them there. So, and this is a little bit extreme, but we had these kids for many years and we were able to do things like this. And the purpose was not just to see how fast you could go or how long you could stay in, but it was to see how well you could come out. And so the challenge was actually, you go in and your breath leaves you, right? Have you ever been and just jumped in really cold water? You just your muscles all tense involuntarily, or seemingly involuntarily, and you're just in it, and you try to swim out as hard as you can, and your body's doing everything. But for them, who had been trained in exercising their will, some of them were in and out, and it was great. It depends on the stage. We had actually 11 to 18-year-olds. But some of them were able to dunk their heads all the way under and then hold there for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, a minute. Really. And then the most impressive part to me was slowly lift their head out and just stand like this. Because they had been taught to train their will. So it's also a matter of giving them challenges. A lot of times I would use reverse psychology in a low-key way. But I would be like, oh, there's this thing. You probably can't do it. And they're like, what? I can't do it? I'll do it 7 times. Different things. We also would go on these trips, service adventure trips I mentioned last time. Basically, we'd take them to another country or another part of our country for 2 weeks, and we would do things like service and physical challenges. A lot of times it involved sleeping outside or also just travel in general. We hiked in the Himalayas last time in Nepal. We went backpacking up there. And they absolutely eat it up. It's actually one of the best parts of the whole year because on one hand, they're on their own. They're outside of the home, so their traditional support system is gone, and now they get to see who it is that they actually are. Now, that isn't a practical thing for all people. They can't send their students or their children to all parts of the world. But giving them opportunities. Let them take the metro by themselves one day. Let them go start a project on their own. Let them cook a meal for the family. Now, you may suffer temporarily. But they'll learn an important lesson that they have something to contribute. One of the dangers that's happening in the West is something, and it's not just the West, called helicopter parenting. It's where the parent is hovering like a helicopter right above them and watching everything do and making sure they're having the right experiences. But in this time, the best thing that they can do is go out, make their own decisions, and completely fail. This is one of the core stages of the will years, is they have to fail and they have to learn how to fail. Because without failure, we can't actually learn what true success is. We have to go out on our own and try something. And in fact, you look up until relatively recently in human history, this age was the beginning of adulthood in a lot of ways. They had to go have jobs. Sometimes they would even have families. They had to go and make a life for themselves. And because of the will and also what was required of them, the more space we leave for the will to grow, the more it will grow. And will is one of the most important qualities that we have. Yogananda said that the greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. The greater the flow of energy, the greater the magnetism. So in a way, even by doing little things like letting them go and do something on their own, we're actually creating their ability to master their own energy in really subtle ways. Is there a game for this one? We used to try different things with them. We had a lot more flexibility than some schools, but in terms of breaking habits, it's always good at this point to start challenging them to break habits. And I would do little things like you brush your teeth a certain way, try it the other way. Left, switch hands, switch quadrants. We do so many things on autopilot that even just realizing what you're doing without thinking and what you're doing unconsciously will help you start to take control of your own life. I mean, really, there are people out there now that are living, from morning to night on total autopilot because they haven't been given the opportunities to grow their own willpower. And you can live a whole life like that, and it's fine. But if our role as parents and educators is to shepherd our child to the highest possible life that they can experience, then we have to always be looking for ways to help them grow and challenge them. The last stage, actually one more thing about the will that's important, just before I forget. The most important thing that Swamiji talked about with the failing of tests, and this is something that you can just directly tell someone in the will years, and if you find the right moment, they might find it really helpful. When Swamiji was young, he would smoke cigarettes, back when he was in college. And he knew it was bad for him, and he knew he didn't want to do it, but he would quit, and then he'd be at lunch, and then with his coffee, he'd be like, it'd be nice, a cigarette. So he'd go back. But what he said was the most important thing that he tuned into, which was a samskar from previous lives, I'm sure, is not to say, I have failed. Because when we say, I failed, we are affirming the failure, and we will attract more of it to ourselves. It just becomes its own loop. We have to say, I have not yet succeeded, or some variation thereon. Because when he said that, I've not yet succeeded, he'd go back, I've not yet succeeded. He'd quit, start smoking, I've not yet succeeded. But eventually, one day, he had his cigarettes, he looked at them and was like, I'm done. He gave them away, he never smoked again. Because he'd been reinforcing the idea of success. So when your child makes a mistake, the most important thing you can do at any age is tell them, it's okay. It's okay. We all make mistakes. Give them an example of a mistake that you've made. When you're a child and you look at adults, you assume they're all perfect, that they all have it together, they all know everything. We know more, but we all know we don't know everything. So helping them to understand, I have more perspective, I do have more wisdom than you, so when I tell you to do something like not walk in the middle of the road, you should probably listen. But I still make mistakes. The other day I did this. Many years ago when I was your age, I did this. My dad started to reveal more and more of his childhood and his, especially his adolescent years to me as I grew older. And I suddenly realized that I was actually doing pretty good. Relatively. He has turned into a remarkable soul. He is a light bearer and a teacher in the school in Palo Alto, and just really a saint of a man. And he made tons of mistakes, especially at this age. But those are the mistakes that made him. You look at any great person, any scientist, any leader, all of the different things, they have all made tons of mistakes, but what sets them apart is they learn from those mistakes. They integrate the mistakes, and then they move on with their lives. One last thing I'll address, because I've read this before and it turns out to just be completely false, is that will is a muscle, right? So the reason we do the small things not the small things, but the ice bucket, it doesn't seem particularly relevant to life, is because when you practice engaging your will, you actually get better at it. Each time you say, no, I'm not going to have another cup of chai, or I'm not going to, well, you should have another cup of chai, it's delicious, but I'm not going to have that, I'm not going to have this cookie, I'm not going to, just sleep. I'm going to stay up and read a spiritual book, or whatever it is that takes energy for you to improve yourself and to move better. You're actually increasing will. Now, scientifically, in all psychological circles, until very recently, they said willpower is an expendable resource. If you use too much of it, it'll be gone. Yeah, to the point where, and I don't know if it's because of this, but it said that former President Obama, used to only have one kind of suit because he didn't want the first thing he did in the morning to have to make a decision and thereby waste some of his deciding power. It turns out that is not true, even scientifically. We know it not to be true spiritually, but in fact, that whole premise was built on this very funny study about a cookie being on a plate, and they had to do a test, and then they could eat the cookie, and it turned out not to be good science. So if anyone ever tells you, I don't want to do will because then I won't have will for later, nope. Cut it out. Will only increases. The more you use it, the better at it you become. So give lots of opportunities for your children to exercise will, to learn who it is they are, to go out and make mistakes. The last one is intellect. And this is from 19 to 24. And this is not as much in our control, right? Often our kids go to college, they're somewhere else, they're at this point, already sort of becoming adults themselves. In America, we end college, and maybe it's the same here actually, around 22 usually. Is that about right? So the intellect years aren't even over yet. You can see where college is a logical conclusion with intellect. We're now at a stage where hopefully we've mastered our body. Our feeling nature is developed enough that when we're sad, we can overcome. We have some sort of regulation. Our will is such that even if something's hard, we decide to do it, we're going to do it. And we get to the point where we're ready now, again, inwardly, to develop the intellect, to get to the point where we understand why. A big part of these years is reason, the development of reason. Traditionally, Swamiji said that there was a flaw in that, though, because reason is something, and I think we've all seen this on some level, that can be manipulated in order to prove something that is not true. So Swamiji talks about this truth versus fact. So when you go into the hospital to visit your friend, and you see that he looks pretty bad, what do you say to him? Do you say the fact? Oh, wow, you are pale. You look terrible. You're probably going to be in here a long time. Or do you say, you look like you're doing better. You look like you have more energy. You look well. How are you feeling? How is it that you're so light? That's not fact necessarily, but it is truth. Swamiji said truth is always beneficial. And so when we talk about using the intellect and reason, we have to use reason in a way that guides us towards truth, not fact. There's a quote from the book actually that I wanted to read. A truth is in harmony with all levels of reality, whereas a fact may be relevant to only one level of reality. Meaning that the fact is he looks sick. But what are the other levels of reality? He needs to improve. He needs to, on some level, believe he can improve in order to be sick. Words have magnetism and power, and so when we say things that are bad, they reinforce. So if our goal is for him to be well, the truth is, you look so well. You look like you're doing much better, even though it's not a fact, because this one is true on more levels of reality. It's also true on higher levels. So a lot of what the intellect years are for is figuring out your priorities. So you may want to be a mathematician. You go to the best school, and you're trying to train specifically in math. But being a mathematician is more than just understanding only the things that are directly involved in math. There's a lot of creativity. There's actually a lot of artistic beauty in math. And so learning only math, you go to school and you take all math classes, you don't take any art, you don't take any literature, you want to just focus on that one thing. But in the meantime, you've missed out on the truth that to be a good mathematician or to be a good anything requires you to be a whole person. So you have to look at the entire picture. You actually do need to learn something about art or literature or find other ways to improve, because the fact of only learning math will turn you into this very narrow thing. And it's not that it's not true, it's a fact, it's just not the highest truth. You need to be constantly refining your whole self, making sure that you're a more balanced person. The most successful scientists, I mean, you look at Einstein, he knew lots of facts, but even as he discovered them, he knew that intuitive perception was his most important tool. In fact, I mean, the famous story of the formula of relativity, E equals mc squared, came in a flash. Then he had to go and prove it with all the facts. So in this age, and also in ourselves, we're training ourselves to look at the hierarchy of truth and decide what is most important to us. So facts, it's not that facts aren't important, but they can lead you astray. I was once driving in a car, long road trip, and we were listening to the radio. And sometimes in between cities in America, you can tune into some pretty interesting radio stations. This one was a guy. He was a PhD. He received his PhD from Harvard University, no, Stanford, a very good university in America. And he spent an hour and a half talking about why dragons exist. Feel free to laugh. He was basically proving that dragons exist. His entire rationale was based around the idea that there was a swamp in Africa that had only been like 10% explored. And so that's where all the dragons are. And then he would pull, like, you know, there's this Sword in the Stone stories, King Arthur, and there were dragons there, and then maybe this other animal from this mythic time was a dragon, and they're all in the place we haven't explored. Well, he kind of used reason to prove his point, right? Well, if there are dragons, where are they? They're in this place you haven't been. Well, what about, like, why hasn't anyone seen them? Oh, they're in this myth, this children's story that people like. He had built an entire thesis with reason that could be logically followed that was not existing in the realm of truth. Well, actually, I can't say for sure. Maybe there are dragons. But you can see where if you take an idea, you see this actually also in like some really dark things. One of the most important reasons to really understand this is that it can prepare you for when the world starts to lie to you, especially on a really large scale. Like in the United States right now, and this will be my last sort of thing to wrap it up, we have, there's a lot of misinformation going on. We're more polarized than we've ever been. So we have some people saying, you know, this is true. In this case, we need a wall. We need a wall right now in order to stop this national emergency. The other people are saying that's not true. But it's not just a difference of opinion. They're getting information from entirely different sources. And so what do you believe? How do you know what is true? The truth is, the best way, the only way to discriminate between truth and fact is through intuition. It's through inner feeling. And it's one of the reasons that the intellect, just like the body is outward, feeling is inward, will is outward, the intellect is also inward. And it allows us, as we connect all of these other things, especially feeling, to the intellect, we can start to sense when something is true. We use our reason as much as it can take us, but then we start to understand we have to bring it inside because it starts from the inside. So I know most of you aren't actually training college-age children and that they go off. But even in ourselves, today, we have all of these faculties working inside of us. We are all a combination of all of these things. And finding out how they interrelate and how they connect with you is basically the core to becoming a whole person, a person who can go through life and be successful and be happy and find success, material success too. It all flows from the same source. If you are at all interested in learning more about all these things, again, Education for Life, everything, but a lot more. It's really like one of the best spiritual books I've ever read, and it's not about spirituality, which is one of the most remarkable parts about it. For there, I think I will leave it. Thank you so much for your kind attention. If you have any questions, I want to honor the time for ending if you have to go, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them or get into anything else. Thank you so much.
Thank you.